Hello and a very warm welcome to Accenture Presents ETStudios Digital Compass in association with ETCIO. I'm your host Divina Lasson. Now we at ET are thrilled to bring you this unique series with the aim of providing a 360-degree view on the initiatives that are needed to shape up a future digital society. On this exciting episode, we take on women in tech, bridging the STEM gap. Now, data says that the Indian economy could grow by an additional 60% or US $2.9 trillion by 2025 if we achieve parity between the number of women and men participating in the workforce. Thus, it's undeniable that organizations should work towards enabling, empowering, and engaging women in STEM. This session will throw light on the advancements of women as leaders in the tech ecosystem and to understand how to bridge the STEM gap. So without further ado, it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce our guests today, Maya Nair, CISO CRISIL, and Shweta Singh, CDO, Tata AIA. Welcome, Shweta.
Thank you.
Ladies, thank you so much for being here today. It's an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. I'd like to begin just with understanding a little bit, setting the context here. When it comes to women in STEM, it's clear that the roles, the opportunities that exist are still somewhat of a challenge. There are still issues for women in this career line. So I'd love to understand from you, what are some of the reasons in your experience and where's it all going from here? Shweta, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I think we've come a long way from women being just mere home workers and, executioners to them becoming leaders today. Organizations today do give equal opportunities to all their employee segments, in their learning and their development and exposure to various initiatives. Having said that, there are certain enablements that we need to bring about to really have the women come to our forefront. One such initiative would be to create networking platforms. We do not have as many opportunities to interact, engage with our women folks. And it's really great to have this forum being set up for this discussion. It's important to create these platforms and really get the women to interact and engage. The second such initiative would be to really create more role leaders and models. We do not have as many mentors as leaders today. There's a dearth of women leadership. And that's something which we need to create a culture of awareness and education so that women can look up to these role models and strive to move forward. Another thing which is more from an individual perspective would be the imposter syndrome, which we need to get over with. Quite a few of us, and this is across genders, but I think it's really important to overcome this feeling that we often feel, that our work is not getting acknowledged. And therefore, we start building this anxiety that, there is something missing in what I am doing. And therefore, the confidence levels drops and we hesitate to move forward. So I think that's something which we need to create an environment that we are able to overcome this syndrome to get over with. And I think there are industries where we have certain biases and certain stereotypes, which we will need to consciously make an effort to overcome and move forward. So I think those are some of the things which I'd like to really point about.
Thank you for sharing that. Maya, let's get you in on this. What, again, in your opinion, are some of the reasons why women in STEM line of work are still facing a differentiation in opportunities?
I would like to think of it in three different segments. One is the cultural and the societal piece of it, wherein traditionally we are told or we understood from the various cues that we pick up as a child that these are some of the areas where a woman can excel or they are supposed to excel or they are supposed to spend their time on. These may be like a teacher or a social worker or in medical profession you find a lot of women. So these are by default, you're okay to pursue those things. But STEM still doesn't figure out in that. In engineering college, if you look at, there are a lot of girls whom we see now, but when we were studying, there weren't so many. So with time, it is changing. Obviously, it's changing now, so it's good. But otherwise, there is a social thing that has been set in which we try to follow. That has to consciously change. All of us, we should try and change that societal thing. It may also vary with place. Say, for example, in Kota, even if you join a JEE course, nobody will ask anything because you are supposed to attempt it at least once. While in other many smaller cities, they may think, why are you even attempting it? Because IIT is not a thing for you. So these things will keep changing. Another one is something that we feel internally that Shweta spoke about, the imposter syndrome. I think it's a very vital point because a lot of us go through that. Because when things go southwards, we feel that no, I'm not really cut out for it. Why am I even doing it? So maybe I should not do this. It's wrong of me to do this. And then the spiraling happens, okay, and the confidence goes down slowly, and you start to doubt yourself, your capabilities. And to add to that, again, as Shweta mentioned, you don't have somebody to look forward to. There aren't any role models. So we don't know where we are heading. So we get stuck there. So that's the internal thing which we will have to come out. We should be bold enough to speak up. So these things are something that one has to take care of without a lot of interference from outside, because there are times when you get somebody to motivate you, but there are times when you don't get anybody to motivate you. Then comes maybe the most important piece, which is the organization piece, wherein organizations mindfully recruit women, mindfully promote them, put them in decision-making positions, not just to meet numbers, but give them roles that are meaty so that they're able to advance. So I think all these three areas count a lot when it comes to women advancing their careers.
So, it's a very interesting point you both make about there being a lack of role models when it comes to STEM positions in India. What would you say as female leaders in the tech space are some of the biggest challenges that you face in India as women in leadership positions, Maya?
At the time of recruitment, when we look at, we do take a lot of women at the starting of the roles. Say we do a lot of campus hires, we take lateral hires with very junior levels, 1 or 2 years of experience and things like that. Till then, it is all okay. But when they grow up the ladder, or whenever we do a lateral hire of a senior position, that's where I think the problem actually starts. So you find a lot of good percentage of women at lower ranks, but as it goes up, the percentages will fall sharply. And when you also look at the roles, even at the top levels, which are very decision-making roles, you don't find many women there. So one point is in grooming them into taking up the next positions and helping them to grow on their career. It's not just about the overall percentage of diversity that we are able to demonstrate, but it's also about diversity at each level, or maybe the bands that you consider. So at each band, you should be able to demonstrate a diversity. Only then the company overall will progress in terms of the DEI initiative, and only then we will be able to provide the role models. But if you have not given that career path to them, what will the juniors look forward to? They don't have anything to look forward to. So giving that career progress path is extremely essential. And a role model need not always be a woman.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's true. And speaking of DE&I, what are some of the examples that you can share of really best practices when it comes to in ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion in the corporate space?
So I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is a much wider topic, right? It's not just about women. It's about your race, your religion, your physical abilities. It's about geographies, right? So inclusion of all. And to really move forward on this, I think the first step is to really acknowledge that there is a gap. The first starting point is to accept the fact that we have a gap in DE&I space. And the second most important, according to my opinion, would be to be aware of this unconscious bias that we all may carry. That by natural selection we look forward to having somebody who may not not be this, and then creating awareness in your own team, in your own leaders across the organization, that we may have this unconscious bias, and we have to therefore take a conscious step to overcome this unconscious bias and get these people to really join your teams and then move up the ladder. The third and most important aspect would be to really create a sense of belongingness. And let's say we talk about women specifically. It's important to feel that you belong. You're not an outlier that is getting onto a particular career path which is dominated by the other gender. And therefore, it is important to pick up initiatives which are very women-centric. I'd like to quote about how it works for our organization. Our MD and CEO, Mr. Naveen Taheliani, and our HR head, Ms. Crystal Bisania, they've taken very conscious steps to promote this culture. We have very specific initiatives for women with respect to whether it is their well-being and how they manage their work-life balances, how you're able to manage from remote working, or you are giving the facility to have your kids to be put up in a creche. awards which are very specifically dedicated to divas to be really acknowledged. So there are a lot of initiatives which we have to create and make them feel that they are part of the organization. The other aspect I would want to believe is that we have to celebrate. Celebrate the festivals of all religions, and if you really have time to spend upon, be with the families of the people, irrespective of which particular festival it is all about, and do it jointly. That's something which I think as a culture, if we start fostering these small steps, will really go a long way in bringing out the change that we all look forward to.
Fantastic. Maya, what about you? Any sort of best practices or any examples you'd like to share about DE&I really being addressed in a very productive and proactive manner?
The organizations that are forward-looking recognize that there is a need to address the specific needs of women at various stages of their lives. I'm not just thinking about a maternity leave or an extension of a maternity leave, but also about recruiting somebody who's pregnant. I've seen that there is, as Shweta mentioned, there's an unconscious bias, sometimes a conscious bias. Okay, if you don't pass this particular test in your medical examination, maybe we cannot take you because you're going to go on leave. Yeah. So those things have to consciously come down, and I'm sure many of the forward-looking organizations are actually looking at it. They don't ask any of those details, and there are many organizations who also allow or recognize live-in relationships, wherein you may, even if you're not married, you may get into maternity leave later on. So those things are allowed in many forward-looking organizations. And the remote working is a great boon, not only to women, but I should say to men also equally, but maybe a little bit more to women, because if there's a sudden change in the family setup or something like that, and they have to just stay back at home, but the work cannot get hampered at that point in time. So remote working is a big boon for all of us. I would say that is one silver lining of the lockdown, actually, because now we know that everything can be done remotely. So there is no real need to travel to office. While many of us still prefer to work from offices, work can simply happen wherever you are. So that's a good thing that has actually happened, even though nobody wanted that to happen that way. So that's one thing that I can say. And the trainings that are specifically targeted to upskill women is something that I think many organizations have now started looking at, because especially in the technology field, we might have studied many things, we might have worked on many technologies, but 6 months if you don't upskill yourself, you're actually obsolete. So the training is something that many organizations have actually enforced in a soft way, that you need to do at least 1 or 2 courses in 6 months' time for you to be considered for the next promotion or for the next role change. So training, education and upskilling is something that I think women should really focus on, especially in the STEM field.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So moving on from corporate a little bit more into the space of entrepreneurship and startups, as per a recent report released by the RBI, it says that as few as 6% of startups in India are actually women-founded startups, which is astounding given that India is really sort of a startup hub globally, worldwide. So what do you think are some of the initiatives or processes that can happen to really encourage and enable women in a more entrepreneurship and in a startup space as well?
So I think this is all a game of percentages. If you were to look at our nation, I think the number of working women employed or, professionals that we may have, as a percentage itself is lesser, which therefore translates to how many entrepreneurs we may have. And if you were to look at it, we've been a patriarchal society for a while. And as you just mentioned in her, in a previous discussion, we do not inculcate a habit of the ability to take risks, the ability to be able to create capital, or be financial independent at very early stages. We do not really have a mindful thought towards that, more specific to our children, and therefore the journey has to really start from there. We have to allow our children and we have to allow our women and girls to start having the mindset about creating this as an ability in themselves as they grow up. And then as we move forward and get into the corporate space, I think some of the things that we need to really look forward to is to give them a chance to do different roles. There shouldn't be any stereotypes about the kind of a role a particular person can do or is capable or may have a competency. And as rightly mentioned, right, there are enough training and learning and development to enhance your skills to do different things. And therefore, role shifts become really important when it comes to, creating and fostering a culture where we can, have this, risk-taking ability, doing different things, thinking really out of the box can be brought about. The other thing I think which will be important would be to spread awareness about how to really generate capital. Access to finance is something which a lot of people, and specifically women, may not even know about. And therefore, awareness about how can you really have access to generate capital becomes very important. And that's really a good step to really create and foster this culture. And if you were to look at it, social media has been an amazing platform. If you look at Instagram and some of the other platforms where you have a lot of women coming into the space of, doing these small-time businesses, whether it's clothing, whether it's pickle, whether it is food. But at least we are seeing that trend now. And therefore, coming back to the point that creating platforms becomes really important. Whether it is physically, whether you're interacting, or whether we have forums like this, or whether we have the media that creates this platform, that becomes an important step to really have women as entrepreneurs, I would like to say.
Yeah, fantastic. And Maya, what about you? What would you say are some of the steps that can be taken? We've been talking about building communities, platforms, networking opportunities. So what would you say are some of the steps that would be required to really encourage women either in tech leadership roles or as budding entrepreneurs in India?
So when you asked about entrepreneurs, I actually realized that we haven't even thought of it. We hardly see any women entrepreneur approaching us with a new solution, a service, a product. They are nearly non-existent, I must say, which is sad when we think of it. And when we look at women who graduate and who are entering into the workforce, we always think of jobs. Maybe as Shweta mentioned, I think it's also about the financial literacy and the risk appetite that they have. Because having your own business is always very risky. You don't have a paycheck coming at the end of the month. So you don't know whether you will be able to pay your employees next month, whether you'll be able to run the company next month. So it's a lot of risk that one has to take while running our own company. So I've not really come across many, to be honest. I did a few very good solutions and products, but not many of them. I have not seen any platform or anything which is specifically targeted at technology women entrepreneurs. So I think your next target should be to look at that. I think it's a wonderful thing to think of, because I'm sure women have a lot of ideas. They are doing wonderfully well in many profiles within the corporate world. So why not be a self-employed entrepreneur? It's a good thing. There's a long way to go. We have not even touched the surface so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been talking about role models and inspirational figures in the STEM space or as entrepreneurs. And we're sitting here today with two such role models. And I'd love to ask you, before we wrap up, a little bit about your experience as women in this field who are really sort of shattering the glass ceiling and paving the way forward for women leaders, women in these roles that are, as we've discussed, not traditionally considered as jobs roles for women. So what have your experiences been like?
Getting a woman role model in technology has been a challenge, I must say. While we see a lot of scientists who have actually done great deals of things in the space research and things like that, in the technology field, in the corporate segment, not many women leaders are there, have been there to inspire in the journey. While I've looked at many of the company heads who have been women and who have done wonderfully well in their jobs, especially in the rating research, the field where I'm currently working in. It has been the women-dominated field. So I've actually had the chance to interact with many great women leaders in that area. They're all into the finance and the business side, not much on the technology side. But when I need motivation, I don't actually differentiate between men and women there, because if we are able to see a good way of working from somebody, I just adopt it. So I had the opportunity to work with many men who have actually inspired me. But in the tech field, I doubt whether I had anybody, whether I got a chance to look forward to somebody as a mentor.
But what has your experience as a female leader in tech been like? What is some maybe motivation you can give also to the new women entering into the workforce right now? Because you yourself, both of you, are in fact the role models that we're talking about.
See, we do conduct sessions to inspire them. We do conduct sessions specifically for women and for both, actually. So what we try to tell in those sessions is, one, it is doable. It's quite doable. And you don't have to sacrifice your personal lives in order to excel in your careers. Because I see that somewhere that unspoken fear is that when I focus too much on my career, am I actually losing out on my family life? Because people actually think that, see, the biological clock is also ticking. Whenever you need to start your family, you need to start your family. You can't wait for a very long time for that. And suppose I have to invest a lot of time in my career, am I also losing out on my family? Am I not fulfilling my duties there? So these worries keep cropping in people. So there, interacting with them and giving them a perspective really helps, because we are actually showing our own examples, right? We are leading normal lives, I can say. We're not doing anything extra. We're not missing out on anything. So talking to them really helps, because they really open up when you talk to them. And then the fears will come out. And then we can say that, no, it's quite doable. And so we can give them tips, because, see, you always need a little support system. Your family has to support you. They need to understand you. You also need people who are helping you, like domestic helps and drivers, those kind of people. You need them, all of them. You're actually helping them to lead a better life themselves. Okay, when you're actually making their lives also easier. So these things we can actually tell them. One very small thing which I've actually noticed is many women don't have their own transport. They depend either on a public transport, or they depend on the company transport which is there, which is from time to time. So by the time, say it's 7, they need to go because my bus is going now. I think somewhere they have to come out of it. When you are able to travel on your own, you are in a safe and secure place, and the time doesn't matter anymore, so you can focus on your work. Even though it appears to be a very small thing, it can go a long way. I used to depend on public transport once upon a time when my manager said that, you need to be on your own. You cannot say that, I have to go because it's getting dark, I have to be home. He said, you have to travel on your own. You cannot depend on anybody. And I think that was a turning point in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Shweta, I'd love to get you in on this. As a leader, female leader in the tech space.
So I completely agree with what we just heard from her. It's really important to really start these small things that talking about being independent to travel is an important part. Similarly, the independence to take decisions, no matter how small or big. It's about your work, it's about your project, it's about how you want to deal with a particular initiative in your teams. It's important that they stop coming to you while we are there to guide and mentor and give them directions of how it will be best. But it's really important as leaders to give them the chance to take that decision. Good, bad, not so good is a different point. But that is a step which we need to create, and get this environment that take your decisions. See which way it goes. I mean, if something's really going wrong, of course we are there to take it. But that's a small step we need to bring about. See how you want to manage your things. It's important. Give them very different aspects of the job. I have experimented this in my own teams. That particular woman is doing a particular kind of a job. And sometimes they are not really aware of what more they can do. The competence that holds within which we don't acknowledge ourselves. Put them into a different initiative, more tech, completely not into what they may have a skill set for, and groom them. The kind of confidence that comes out of it, the kind of realization that comes in the individuals themselves, for us as leaders to look at that look, she's doing it. So those are the small things which, we need to create and harmonize more as much as we can, and small things matter. And as rightly said, get them to come and share stories. Stories at home, and stories in the office, in the work front, how you dealt with what you dealt with, or how good you did something that you did. Come up with those stories and move away from these, inhibitions that we have within ourselves. I did this, was it right, was it not wrong? Come speak about it and share. And these are the smaller things which, which create an environment which you feel positive about, and you find it more forward-looking. So I think as leaders, that's something which we've been trying to do, and I think that's the direction we may all want to pick up as we move along.
That's really inspiring. I can see how and why you're both very much leaders, women leaders in the tech space. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Before we wrap up, I would like to ask you if there's anything you can share about the top priorities that you have when it comes to really fostering, expanding, and growing DE&I in the coming year. Just any of your priorities.
If I were to answer that, I think learning and development, and especially in the tech space, right? We're evolving in the tech space really rapid and fast. So a lot of learning and development is important, and not just for women across the teams that you may have. It's really important to keep pace. Otherwise, you become irrelevant. And there are so many skill sets which are evolving, which you want to do. So that's the first thing. The second is diversify. Do beyond what you're used to doing. Do more things which are different. So diversifications of your job profiles and roles that you may want to do is another important thing. And the third is to really celebrate. Celebrate the small wins, celebrate the big wins, celebrate the acknowledgements and the receipts of whatever you're doing is something which we've been pretty weak about as far as the women's segment is concerned, and therefore celebrating and getting them to be appreciated about this is something which is really important. So these are the three things which I think I'd like to focus upon.
Thank you. Maya?
I have recently heard about an initiative by Data Security Council of India, which is a NASSCOM initiative, that they're training women from tier 3 or say rural areas specifically on cybersecurity. I am really excited to work with them. I've reached out to them for details. One reason is that they're raw talent, okay? And especially for people from, I think, on smaller towns and cities and villages, will show more loyalty towards the company, and we may have a little longer tenures of employees there. They would have gone through a little hardships, I'm assuming. So they will be able to pick up the hardships that the technology and the cyber field anyway has to offer. So that's one area where I'm really looking forward to working on that area. I would also want the leadership levels within the cybersecurity to be picked up by women. Because right now also I do have a good share of women in the team, but many of them are not in the leadership roles. They're on the individual contributor kind of roles. So I would really want them to become at the leadership levels wherein I can work on my succession planning through them. So that's another thing that I'm really looking forward to.
Fantastic. Ladies, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking to you, getting all your inspiration about women, not only in the tech front, but in entrepreneurship and just across the board, and what it's really going to take to bridge the gap, which is what we're here to talk about today. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, on that note, that's all we have for you on this episode. A big thank you to all of our viewers. For more such in-depth conversations, do stay tuned to ET Studios. Until next time, many thanks for watching.